Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to do something that's maybe a little bit unusual. We're going to try to replace the spark plugs in this 99 Jimny using, well, they're non-standard spark plugs to say the least, but if these actually work out, and I got this idea from a forum, if this actually works out, this will give pretty much everybody a local source for spark plugs for the K6A engine at the very least, but there's a good chance that they'll also fit other engines like the F6A and maybe even the F5A, although I wouldn't count on that. So what I did was I went online and I was reading around different forums and I was cross-referencing all these different part numbers for spark plugs, and I stumbled upon a little bit of information. Somebody was saying that the same spark plugs that are used in these engines, which is an NGK part number, I don't recall it off the top of my head, but somebody was saying that it's very common for people to use these spark plugs in their Harley Davidsons, and this gave me an idea. So I phoned up the local Harley Davidson dealership and I asked them about these spark plugs. And they told me that, oh yeah, that's the spark plug that we use in the Harley Davidson V-Rod. For those of you who aren't familiar, the V-Rod is the only liquid-cooled Harley Davidson, the one that the engine is this bizarre collaboration between Harley Davidson and Porsche. So I got the guy, and they had these on stocks, on hand rather. These little bitty Harley Davidson spark plugs, they only cost me $7 and some odd cents Canadian per, so I thought that was a pretty decent deal. And I opened them up, and I mean, I'm not an expert, but these look like they're around the same size. Now, I did have a little bit of difficulty sourcing these because I asked the guy to look up the NGK part number for me, and he said, oh, we don't sell NGK spark plugs, we have our own brand of parts, which I thought was a little bit stupid, but so be it. Anyhow, the part number that I got here, it says plug number 10R12A, part number 32335-04. And if these work and fit, that will give pretty much everybody in the entire world, because Harley Davidson dealerships are everywhere, a source for these pretty common pieces that may need to be changed on your little Japanese K-cars. So you'll notice the first thing I did was remove this intercooler pipe, because I suspect it will be in the way of this little plastic piece right here. And underneath this piece of plastic is where our spark plugs are located. These small bolts here are 8mm. They should come out easily enough, so you can use a screwdriver. This one underneath the intercooler is going to give me a bit of a hard time, so I'm going to have to get a wrench on this because I don't think the screwdriver will get in there. If you don't have an 8mm wrench, and it turns out I don't, a 5/16 will fit as well. Now we should be able to remove this plastic cover to expose the ignition coils. There is a vacuum line in the way, so just be careful, but you can work around it. There's no need to disconnect it. And there we have our three little bitty ignition coils. These look like they're a 10mm, so I'll go grab one of those and we'll remove these. As is often the case, I was right, these are a 10mm. If you don't have a 10mm, a 3/8 will most likely work as well. Hopefully these will come out in one piece with the boot still attached. It appears that they have, or this one has. We're off to a good start. Not like my last vehicle where they came out in pieces and I had to glue them back together because I'm a cheap asshole who wouldn't buy new ignition coils. And that one has a little bit of oil on it. It's probably just a little bit of oil from the valve cover gasket. I don't imagine it's anything to be too concerned about. The one in the back is a little bit more stubborn, but again, it comes out fairly easily. You don't want to wrestle these things too hard because they're not the world's most durable components. Overall, I'd say they look pretty good. There's a little bit of grease in each one. Now I'm going to try to remove these using this janky little spark plug removal tool. Depending on who put these in last and how long they've been in there, there is a chance that they're on too tight for me to get with this tool, but we'll see. I hate these tools, they're junk. No such luck. These spark plugs are 5/8, which is a pretty standard size for a spark plug. Now you don't want to apply a whole ton of force on these, just enough to crack the torque. You can usually tell if some ham-fisted asshole installed them before you because it'll require a lot of force to loosen them like that one did. Now the socket I'm using doesn't have a rubber insert to pull the spark plugs out, so at the end I'm going to use that spark plug removal tool. You may have noticed I use this tool in several pieces. You could use it with one long extension, but honestly I find using two small extensions gives you a bit more flexibility. You'll notice I disassembled the tool a few times throughout the process, and that makes it a lot easier to get into tight spaces. That's just a little tip for you. I don't know how well you can see this, but there's actually quite a bit of oil on this spark plug. That usually indicates an issue with your valve cover gasket. The part number for these spark plugs that are in the vehicle right now are DCPR7EIX, and those are NGK iridium plugs. Looking at a side-by-side comparison of these two plugs, they do appear to be the same size, give or take. The Harley Davidson plug may be just a hair shorter as far as reaching into the piston, but they do appear to be the same, and these Harley Davidson plugs should work. I'm going to install them and we'll fire the engine up and we'll just see how it sounds, whether it runs well or not. Now we'll quickly install the Harley Davidson plugs and see how she runs. There is probably a torque spec for these, but I'm not going to follow it. I'm just kind of installing them finger tight right now. It's not going to sound like that when it's finished, I promise. Although that would be hilarious. Now I also don't know if these have to be gapped. As you can see, I didn't do it. I really just want to see if these work and if it runs. And if it runs well enough, because this will give you new options for parts availability. And that's really what this is all about. We're breaking new grounds here. The torque for spark plugs is usually something small, like 17 foot-pounds. So, I'm kind of just gonna guess. That's probably around, maybe a little more. Using my calibrated torquing arm. That's about right. Almost there. That's probably good enough. It doesn't really matter if the same injector goes in the same, the same ignition coil goes in the same place, but it really, really matters that you plug the right plugs in. That's pretty easy on a 3-cylinder, it's hard to get them mixed up. Working on these small engines is a bit of a treat. Honestly, they're pretty easy to work on. Most of my mechanical experience is working on Land Rovers and Range Rovers, which are not only a bit more complicated, but there's also less room in the engine bay to work with this little tiny 660cc engine. It's a surprising amount of room to work. I must say, I like it. could have tested this without reinstalling the cover, but I have the utmost confidence in my mechanical abilities. So here I am reinstalling it as if I were doing it correctly. I'm thinking I might actually leave that one screw out. That one that's a bit of a pain in the ass underneath the intercooler. It doesn't really need to be there. This is just a cover anyway, so I'm just gonna put the 3 easy ones in. And I may put that one in later, depending on how I feel. Between you and me, probably not. I'm reinstalling all these parts in real time with the video running, just to show you that this really doesn't take a whole lot of time. I think this went this way. Doesn't really matter, it's just a hose, as long as it fits and it's connected securely, you should be fine. It's an intercooler hose, so you could make an argument about something to do with airflow, but let's be honest, this engine makes like 50 horsepower on a good day. In just a second, we'll find out if today is a good day. Come on. There we go. Isn't this thing adorable? All right. Take our tools off the grill. Let's fire it up and see how we did. Well, aside from the god-awful grinding that's coming from my idler pulley, it runs very well. So there you have it. Harley Davidson spark plugs in a K car.